The distress signal came through during dinner shift, which meant half the crew heard it at the same time. Rita Hayes had been explaining to a group of young colonists why their transport ship looked so ugly compared to the sleek vessels in their picture books when the emergency frequency crackled to life. Every conversation in the mess hall stopped. Parents grabbed their children closer. The farmers and engineers who'd signed up for a new life on New Portland Colony suddenly remembered they were traveling through deep space, far from any help. Rita pushed away from the table and headed for the bridge, her boots echoing in the sudden silence. David Ross reached the control room first, his young face already pale as he pulled up the signal data. Behind them, Dr. Nina Okafor arrived with her medical kit still strapped to her back from the health inspections she'd been conducting. Pete Wilson came last, wiping grease from his hands onto his already filthy jumpsuit. "It's Velan," David said, pointing at the translation software. "Freighter called Calm Waters. They're under attack. 4 vessels, military-grade weapons. They're not going to last long." Rita studied the holographic display. The Velan ship was 3 hours away at their current speed. The attackers were Krull, a species known for raiding merchant vessels in the outer sectors. She'd read the reports during her Navy days. Krull were organized, efficient, and brutal when they needed to be. They took cargo, sometimes took prisoners to sell, and left wreckage behind. "We should keep moving," David said quietly. "We've got families aboard, kids. We're not equipped for combat." He wasn't wrong. The Horizon's Edge was a colony transport, not a warship. They had basic point defense systems meant for asteroids and debris. Their main weapons consisted of mining lasers that could cut rock, but would barely scratch military armor. Their crew numbered 47, including children. Against 4 Krull raiders, they were hopelessly outmatched. "How long until they're destroyed?" Rita asked. David checked his console. "Based on the damage reports in their signal, maybe an hour. 2 if they're lucky." Pete snorted from his position by the engine readouts. "Lucky, right, Velans don't fight. They'll surrender and hope the Krull just take the cargo." "Will they?" Nina asked. The engineer shrugged. "Sometimes. Sometimes they take prisoners. Sometimes they just blow the ship anyway because witnesses are inconvenient." Rita looked at the faces around her. David wore the expression of someone who already knew what she was going to decide and dreaded it. Nina looked determined, her hands already checking her medical supplies. Pete seemed resigned, like a man who'd been through this before and knew how it ended. "Change course," Rita said. "Best speed to their location." "Rita," David started. "I know what we are," she cut him off. "I know what we're not. But they sent a distress call. They're asking for help. We're the only ones close enough to provide it." "We can't save them," David said, his voice rising. "We'll just die with them." Rita pulled up the navigation controls and began plotting the course herself. "Then we die. But we don't ignore it. We don't pretend we didn't hear it. That's not what we do." Who does?" David asked. "Earth? Humanity? We're colonists, Rita, not soldiers." She turned to face him directly. "We're human." "That's enough." The course locked in and Horizon's Edge began to turn. In the mess hall, parents were explaining to confused children why their journey had suddenly changed direction. Some understood immediately and began preparing. Others protested, argued, demanded they continue to safety. Rita ignored the comms requests and focused on the tactical display. 3 hours to reach calm waters. She pulled up everything she could find about Krull raiders. Their tactics were straightforward. Overwhelming firepower, quick strikes, minimal risk to themselves. They expected surrender or quick destruction. They didn't expect resistance from ships that couldn't fight back. That gave her an idea, though not a good one. "Nina, prepare medical bay for combat casualties." "Pete, I need you to pull every trick you know." "Can we boost the mining lasers?" The engineer scratched his beard. "Sure, if you want them to explode after 3 shots. How much damage would they do before they exploded?" Pete grinned, understanding. "More than none." "David," Rita continued, "send a response to calm waters. Tell them help is coming, and send an emergency beacon to the nearest human military outpost." "That's the garrison at Theta Station," David said, checking the database. "They're 3 days away at maximum FTL. Tell them we need help. Tell them we're engaging hostile forces to protect a civilian vessel. And David," she added, seeing his expression, "tell them we'll hold out as long as we can." He worked in silence for a moment, then looked up. The Velans responded. They say we should save ourselves." They're thanking us for trying but telling us to stay away. Send them our ETA anyway. 2 hours and 40 minutes until contact. Rita began pulling up every bit of combat training she remembered from her Navy years. It wasn't much. She'd been a transport pilot, not a fighter, but she'd seen combat. She knew what worked and what didn't. More importantly, she knew how to survive. Around her, the crew of Horizon's Edge prepared for a battle they had no business fighting. Faust had made peace with death approximately 15 minutes ago. As captain of calm waters, he'd spent his entire career avoiding this exact situation, following every regulation, paying every bribe, taking every safe route. Yet here he was, watching 4 crawl raiders circle his ship like scavengers around dying prey. His cargo hold contained agricultural equipment bound for a Velan farming colony. Nothing worth dying for, yet the Krull wanted it anyway, along with his ship, his crew, and possibly their lives. Then the impossible happened. A new signal appeared on his sensors. "Captain," his sensor operator called out, her voice shaking. "A ship just dropped out of FTL. They're moving toward us, fast." Faust felt a flutter of hope. Perhaps the Merchant Guild had sent protection after all. Perhaps someone had heard their distress call and sent a proper warship. He pulled up the sensor data and his hope died instantly. The vessel approaching was tiny, barely larger than a personal yacht. Its hull was patched and ugly, showing evidence of multiple repairs. Its energy signature was weak. This wasn't a warship. This was barely a functioning transport. "What is it?" he asked. His sensor operator studied the readings. According to the registry in human colony transport, minimal weapons, 47 life signs aboard. The bridge went silent. Humans. Faust had heard of them, of course. Everyone had. The new species that had stumbled into galactic space about 20 cycles ago, claiming a dangerous world called Earth as their homeworld. They kept to themselves mostly, establishing small colonies, trading rarely, joining no alliances. Most species considered them curiosity at best, primitive embarrassment at worst. "They're hailing us," communications reported. Faust accepted the connection. The human face that appeared was female, with dark skin and calculating eyes that seemed far too calm given the situation. She spoke through the translation matrix, her voice steady. "Calm waters, this is Captain Rita Hayes of the Transport Horizon's Edge. We received your distress call. We're here to help." For a moment, Faust couldn't process the words. Help? This tiny vessel with its barely functional weapons was here to help him? Against 4 Krull raiders? His second officer began laughing, a high-pitched, nervous sound that spread through the bridge crew. Even Faust felt the absurdity hit him like a physical force. "Captain Hayes," he said, trying to keep his voice level, "we appreciate your gesture, but you should leave this area immediately. The Krull will destroy you." "We're not leaving," Rita replied simply. The Krull had noticed the new arrival, too. Their leader's voice came across the open channel, rough and amused. "What's this? Another prize? Humans, I've heard of you. New meat for the grinder. Surrender your vessel now or be destroyed with the Velans." Rita's ship moved between calm waters and the nearest Krull raider. It was a suicidal position, blocking any direct fire at the freighter but making herself the primary target. Faust watched his sensors in disbelief. No one did this. No one sacrificed themselves for strangers. It went against every logical principle of survival. "Listen carefully," Rita said on the open channel. "Break off your attack and leave this system. You have one chance." The Krull leader laughed. So did his companions. Faust found himself laughing too, though his felt more like hysteria. The human captain was trying to intimidate 4 military vessels with a colony transport. It was insane. It was tragic. It was somehow the bravest and stupidest thing Faust had ever witnessed. "You poor primitives," Faust said, unable to help himself. "You came all this way to die with us? How noble, how incredibly foolish." Rita's expression didn't change. "We've sent an emergency beacon to our military outpost. They'll be here in 3 days. We just need to hold out until then." 3 days. The words hung in the air like a bad joke. The Krull leader laughed so hard his image shook on the display. Faust felt his heart sink even further. She was serious. This human actually believed she could survive 3 days against military raiders in a transport ship. Either humans were incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Possibly both. 3 days. The Krull leader repeated. "You think you'll last 3 days? I'll give you 1 hour. Then we start shooting. When we're done with you, we'll take the Velan ship anyway. At least they have the sense to know when they're beaten." The connection cut. The Krull vessels moved into attack positions, spreading out to cover multiple angles. Standard raider tactics designed to prevent escape and maximize damage. Faust had seen it before. He knew how this ended. Captain Hayes, he tried again. Please, save yourselves. Jump to FTL and go. We're grateful for your attempt, but this is suicide. Faust, Rita said, using his name though he didn't remember giving it. I need you to do something for me. Vent all non-essential atmosphere from your outer compartments. Close all bulkheads. Move your crew to the core sections and seal them in. Why would I? Because when the shooting starts, you're going to take damage. I need you to survive it. Can you do that? Faust looked at his crew. They looked back at him with expressions mixing pity and horror. The human was giving him survival instructions while positioning herself to be destroyed first. It was backwards. It was wrong. It violated every principle of logical self-preservation. We'll do it, he said quietly. Good. One more thing. Do you have any debris? Anything you can jettison? Old cargo containers, waste, anything with mass? Yes, we have damaged containers from earlier attacks. Launch them. Create a debris field between us and the Krull. It won't stop them, but it might slow them down. Faust gave the orders, still not understanding. His crew moved to comply, their movements mechanical with shock. The damaged containers began floating out into space, creating a scattered field of metal and composite materials. It was a pittance, barely enough to inconvenience the raiders. He watched Rita's ship maneuver into position, using the debris as partial cover. Her mining lasers powered up, their energy signature pathetically weak compared to the Krull weapons. On his sensors, he could see the human vessel's life signs. 47 people, families, children, all about to die because they responded to a distress call from strangers. Captain Hayes, he said, his voice breaking. Why are you doing this? She looked directly at him through the video link. Because you asked for help. Because that's what humans do. We don't leave people behind. The hour countdown began. Faust watched the human ship and wondered if bravery and stupidity were really that different after all. Hour 17 marked the point where Faust stopped expecting the humans to die and started trying to understand how they were still alive. The Krull had opened fire exactly when promised, their plasma cannons lighting up the darkness of space with burning hate. Rita's ship should have been debris within minutes. Instead, it danced. There was no other word for it. Horizon's edge moved like no transport Faust had ever seen, spinning and rolling in patterns that seemed random but somehow kept the vessel just ahead of the worst damage. Mining lasers flashed out whenever a Krull ship got too close, not doing real damage but forcing them to adjust their approach. The human ship used the debris field like a tool, hiding behind larger chunks, putting obstacles between itself and incoming fire. But nothing could dodge forever. The first serious hit came 20 minutes into the engagement, tearing through the aft section and venting atmosphere into space. Faust watched the damage readouts and waited for the inevitable surrender signal. It never came. Instead, Rita's crew sealed the damaged section and kept fighting. How are they doing this? His second officer whispered. Faust had no answer. Villains didn't fight like this. Neither did most species he knew. When faced with superior firepower, logical beings surrendered and negotiated. They preserved their lives and hoped for mercy. They didn't throw themselves into combat they couldn't win and refused to stop. Hour 23 brought something even stranger. A team of humans in pressure suits launched from Horizon's edge toward calm waters. Faust thought they were abandoning ship until his sensor operator pointed out their trajectory. They were carrying equipment, tools, repair materials. Captain, the human named David called on the comm channel. You've got a coolant leak in your port engine. We're coming to fix it. Your what? Faust couldn't believe what he was hearing. In the middle of combat, while their own ship was being torn apart, the humans were sending people to repair his vessel. We need you mobile, Rita explained, her face showing new cuts and bruises on the video feed. If you can maneuver, we can protect you better. Just let them in. Faust gave the authorization, too stunned to argue. 5 humans in battered pressure suits cycled through his airlock and immediately headed for the engine compartment. His own engineer met them there, watching in disbelief as they began working on systems they shouldn't understand. Human technology was supposed to be primitive, behind galactic standards by at least 2 generations. Yet Pete Wilson, the grease-stained human engineer, took one look at the Velen coolant system and nodded like he'd seen it before. He directed his team with quick efficiency, bypassing damaged sections and rerouting flow through secondary lines. Within an hour, Faust's engines were running better than they had in cycles. How did you? The Velan engineer started. Fixed a lot of broken things in my time, Pete said, already heading back to the airlock. Good luck, friend. Keep those engines running. Hour 31 brought the second wave of damage. Another plasma burst caught Horizon's edge, this time puncturing the main hull. Life support failed in 3 sections. Faust watched the human life signs on his sensors drop from 47 to 44. 3 people dead. He felt sick. Rita kept giving orders, her voice steady even as her ship died around her. She coordinated damage control teams, rotated people through the remaining pressurized sections, and somehow kept flying. The colonists who'd signed up for farming were now running toward fires and sealing breaches. Children were carrying supplies to wounded adults. Everyone moved with purpose, like they'd trained for this their entire lives. Do humans practice for war? Faust asked his second officer during hour 45. I don't know, she replied, but they're good at it. Hour 58 marked the first Krull casualty. Rita had been leading one of the raiders on a chase through the debris field, taking damage but drawing them away from calm waters. Pete's jury-rigged weapons finally worked as planned. The overloaded mining laser fired 3 times in rapid succession, each shot burning hotter than it should. The third shot punched through the raider's shield generator at close range. The explosion wasn't large, but it was enough. The Krull vessel limped away, trailing sparks and atmosphere. The other 3 raiders pulled back, reassessing. They'd expected an easy target. Instead, they'd been fighting for 2.5 days against a transport ship that refused to die. Faust could hear the frustration in their communications, see it in their increasingly aggressive tactics. Hour 67 brought Nina into Faust's life directly. The human doctor called on a private channel, her face exhausted but determined. Captain Faust, I need you to do something. My medical bay is full. I've got wounded I can't help because I don't have space. Can you take some of them? Faust stared at her. You want to send your wounded to us? During combat? We'll use the same shuttle runs we used for the repair team. Please, I've got a man here who needs surgery I can't perform while the ship is maneuvering like this. Your medical bay is intact, stable. I'll send instructions for your doctors. He agreed without thinking. What else could he do? 6 humans came across on stretchers, including David Ross, who'd taken shrapnel protecting a child during the last attack. Nina sent detailed medical files, her instructions clear and precise. Velan doctors worked on human patients with steady hands, following procedures for anatomy they'd never studied. Hour 70 brought desperation. The Krull commander finally recognized he was losing time and reputation by failing to destroy a transport ship. He ordered all 3 remaining vessels to focus fire on Horizon's edge simultaneously. The combined plasma barrage was more than any evasive maneuvers could avoid. The human ship took catastrophic damage. Main engines failed completely. Weapons went offline. Multiple hull breaches vented the remaining atmosphere from half the vessel. Faust watched the life signs flicker and stabilize in only a few sections. Maybe 20 people still alive. Maybe less. The Krull commander broadcast on all frequencies. Surrender now or die. This is your final chance. Faust waited for Rita's response, expecting surrender, hoping for it, needing this nightmare to end even if it meant his own capture. He'd watched these humans fight for 3 days. They'd earned their survival. No one could judge them for giving up now. Rita's face appeared on the display, blood running from a cut above her eye, her uniform torn and burnt. Behind her, Faust could see colonists preparing weapons. Not guns or advanced technology. They had pipes, tools, cutting torches. They were preparing to fight boarding parties hand to hand. We're not surrendering, Rita said simply. Come and take it if you can. The Krull commander's response was incoherent rage. His boarding shuttles launched toward Horizon's edge. Faust watched in horror as Rita coordinated her people into ambush positions in the corridors. They were going to fight in close combat against armored Krull warriors. Humans were supposed to be weak, soft, unable to handle real violence. He was about to witness whether that was true. But before the boarding shuttles reached their target, something else appeared on his sensors. Multiple FTL signatures at the edge of the system. Big ones, moving fast. Nina saw them too. She was still on the comm channel, coordinating with Velan doctors. Her face changed from exhausted determination to something else. Hope, relief, savage satisfaction. They're here, she said quietly. They actually came. Who? Faust asked. Nina smiled, and for the first time Faust saw what a human looked like when they stopped being afraid. Everyone. Pete Wilson sent the final message with hands that shook from exhaustion rather than fear. 3 days of fighting had taught him something important about himself. He'd spent 20 years as a civilian engineer, fixing water purifiers and atmospheric processors on colony worlds. He'd thought that part of his life where he was a soldier, where he did hard things, was finished. Turned out you never really stopped being what you were trained to be. You just pretended until someone needed you again. He typed the message carefully, making sure every word was clear. Rita was organizing the defense against the boarding parties. David was unconscious on a Valen medical table. Nina was still trying to save the critically wounded with supplies that had run out hours ago. Nobody was thinking about calling for help because they were too busy fighting. That made it Pete's job. To any human vessel in range. This is Engineer Pete Wilson aboard Colony Transport Horizon's Edge. We are dead in space. Multiple casualties. Krull raiders preparing to board. We held them for 72 hours defending the Velan freighter calm waters. We held them as long as we could. If anyone hears this, avenge us. Don't let them forget humans protect our own. Wilson out. He broadcasted on every frequency he could access, dumping all remaining power reserves into the transmission. The message would reach Theta Station eventually. Maybe they'd send ships to recover the bodies. Maybe they'd hunt down the Krull who did this. Pete hoped so. He'd be dead, but at least his death would mean something. The first boarding shuttle clamped onto the hull with a metallic clang that echoed through the dead sections. Pete grabbed his improvised weapon, a cutting torch jury-rigged to work as a short-range flamethrower, and headed toward the breach point. Around him, farmers and teachers and families who'd been traveling to start a new life prepared to fight trained warriors. It should have been tragic. Instead, Pete felt strangely calm. They'd done everything right. They'd answered a distress call, protected the innocent, and fought impossible odds. If this was how it ended, at least they'd ended it as humans should. Rita met him at the corridor junction. She'd armed herself with a heavy wrench and what looked like a homemade explosive. Her face was a mask of bruises and cuts, but her eyes were clear. How many? Pete asked. 2 shuttles, maybe 20 Krull total. They'll breach in 2 places, try to overwhelm us with numbers. We've got 16 people left who can fight. Rita nodded like this was acceptable. Like 16 exhausted colonists against 20 armored raiders was reasonable odds. Maybe it was, by human standards. Pete had seen what desperation and rage could do. He'd seen a school teacher take down a Krull in powered armor using nothing but surprise and a titanium support beam. Humans weren't stronger or faster, but they were meaner when cornered, and they absolutely refused to quit. The first breach opened with a controlled explosion. Armored Krull poured through, their weapons ready. They ran straight into Pete's flame trap, jury-rigged fuel lines that ignited when punctured. 3 raiders went down screaming. The others, scattered, their tactics disrupted by an attack they hadn't expected. Humans rushed from side corridors, hitting them with tools and improvised weapons. It was chaos and brutality, and nothing like the clean warfare Pete had learned in basic training 30 years ago. A Krull warrior slammed into him, armored fist catching his ribs. Pete felt something crack and ignored it, bringing his cutting torch up into the gap between helmet and chest plate. The Krull screamed and fell. Pete kept moving. Around him, other colonists fought with the kind of viciousness that only came from protecting your family. The Krull had armor and training. Humans had rage and refused to stay down. The second breach point was worse. The Krull had learned from the first group, coming in cautious and coordinated. Rita led the defense there, organizing farmers into a fighting unit that gave ground slowly, making the raiders pay for every meter. Pete saw her take a plasma bolt to the shoulder and keep fighting. Saw her detonate her explosive in a cluster of enemies, the blast throwing her backwards into a bulkhead hard enough to dent metal. She got back up. Of course she did. She was human. The fighting lasted 10 minutes that felt like hours. When it ended, 6 Krull were dead. The others had retreated back to their shuttles, shocked and confused. They'd expected easy prey. Instead, they'd found humans, and humans didn't die quietly. Pete did a quick count of his people. 16 had started the fight. 9 were still standing. 7 down, 3 dead, 4 too wounded to continue. The odds were getting worse. The Krull commander's voice echoed through the ship's failing speakers. "You're all dead. You know that. We'll just blow the ship apart from outside. No more boarding, no more chances." Pete looked at Rita. She was holding her shoulder, blood seeping between her fingers, her face pale from blood loss. Around them, the survivors gathered close, exhausted and hurt, but somehow still defiant. They'd lost. They all knew it. But they'd made the Krull work for it. That counted for something. "Good fight," Pete said to no one in particular. Rita started to respond, then stopped, her eyes going distant. She was listening to something on her neural implant, the emergency receiver that all ex-military kept active. Her expression changed slowly, pain giving way to disbelief, then to something Pete had never seen on her face before. Joy. Pure, savage joy. "They came," she whispered. "They actually came." "Who?" Pete asked. Rita laughed, the sound slightly unhinged. "The 7th Fleet. Admiral Sarah Kemp. She heard your message, Pete. She heard it, and she brought everyone." Pete didn't understand. Theta Station was 3 days away. There was no way they could have arrived already. Even if they'd left immediately, when the first distress call went out, they shouldn't be here for another 12 hours. Rita saw his confusion and her smile got wider. They weren't at Theta Station. They were conducting exercises 2 systems over. Your final message reached them directly. They came at emergency combat speed. "Pete, the entire 7th Fleet is dropping out of FTL right now." Through the damaged hull, Pete heard the Krull commander shouting orders, his voice rising in panic. The Raiders' sensors must be showing them what Rita was describing. Multiple capital ships entering the system. More firepower than most species saw in their entire military. Pete felt something tight in his chest loosen. They'd done it. They'd held out long enough. Rita activated the ship-wide comms, her voice carrying to every remaining survivor. "This is your captain. The cavalry has arrived. Brace for rescue operations. We're going home." Outside, through the gaps in the broken hull, Pete saw lights. Dozens of them burning bright against the darkness of space. Human warships built for violence and painted in Earth's colors. The most beautiful sight Pete had ever seen. He sat down hard, his legs finally giving out, and watched as the Krull raiders who'd spent 3 days hunting them suddenly became the prey. The hunter had become the hunted, and Earth's children had come for blood. Admiral Sarah Kemp watched the tactical display with cold fury building in her chest. 7 destroyers, 3 heavy cruisers, and her flagship dreadnought Indomitable had dropped out of FTL in perfect formation, surrounding the combat zone like a closing fist. The sight that greeted them was worse than she'd feared. Horizon's Edge was barely recognizable as a ship, torn open and bleeding atmosphere, its hull scarred by days of sustained combat. 47 life signs had departed that colony transport. Her sensors showed 19 still alive, most of them injured. The Krull raiders were trying to run now, their 4 vessels scrambling toward FTL jump coordinates. Too late, far too late. Sarah had been running combat exercises with her fleet when Pete Wilson's final message came through. The words had hit her like a physical blow. Colonists under attack, defending civilians, held for 3 days. Avenge us. She'd redirected every ship under her command and pushed their FTL drives past safe limits to get here. Nobody argued. Nobody questioned. When humans called for help, you came. That was the rule. That was the only rule that mattered. "Open all channels," Sarah ordered. Her communications officer complied instantly, her voice broadcast across every frequency, filling the system with words backed by enough firepower to crack a planet. "This is Admiral Sarah Kemp of the United Earth Navy 7th Fleet. You have attacked our people. You have murdered human civilians who were protecting others. You have 30 seconds to cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Any vessel that attempts to jump to FTL will be destroyed. This is your only warning." The Krull commander's response came back full of false bravado. "You have no authority here, human. This is open space. Your colonists interfered with legitimate salvage operations. We are protected under—" 20 seconds, Sarah interrupted. "We have hostages aboard that wreck. Your people are still alive. If you attack, we'll kill them. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. The Krull were on Horizon's edge, holding her people at gunpoint. Standard hostage tactics meant to create negotiation, delay, allow escape. Most species would pause now, would talk, would try to find diplomatic solutions. Sarah had spent 20 years learning why that was wrong. 15 seconds. Any Krull personnel aboard Horizon's Edge have until we finish this countdown to evacuate. After that, anyone on that ship is considered hostile and will be dealt with accordingly. You're bluffing. You won't risk your own people. 10 seconds. The truth was Sarah would absolutely risk her people because she trusted them to survive and fight while she eliminated the threat. But she didn't have to explain that. The Krull commander would learn soon enough what happened when you threatened humans and then gave them time to prepare. Rita Hayes had survived 3 days of sustained combat. She'd survived 10 more seconds of whatever the Krull tried. The countdown hit 0. The Krull hadn't evacuated. They hadn't surrendered. They'd made their choice. Sarah gave the order she'd been planning since she saw the damage to Horizon's Edge. All vessels, weapons free. Disable, do not destroy. I want them alive for trial. The 7th Fleet opened fire with precision that would have impressed any military academy. Railguns launched magnetically accelerated projectiles at a fraction of light speed, targeting specific systems on each Krull vessel. Engines went first, eliminating any chance of escape. Then weapons, turning raiders into floating junk. The entire engagement lasted 40 seconds. 4 military vessels reduced to debris without a single human casualty. The Krull commander's ship tried one last desperate move, firing everything they had at Indomitable. The plasma bolts and missiles struck Earth's dreadnought directly. Point defense systems destroyed 90% of incoming fire. The rest hit armor designed to withstand nuclear strikes. Sarah didn't even feel the impact. Target their life support, she ordered. Let them breathe vacuum for 30 seconds, then restore it remotely. I want them scared, not dead. Her weapons officer complied with grim satisfaction. The Krull vessel's atmosphere vented into space. Sarah counted to 30 slowly, imagining the panic as trained warriors suddenly couldn't breathe, then nodded. Life support restored. The message was clear. Earth could kill them whenever it wanted. They lived only because Sarah allowed it. Marines, deploy to Horizon's Edge, fast rescue protocols. Get our people out. Assault shuttles launched from 3 destroyers moving toward the damaged colony transport with practiced efficiency. Sarah switched her view to their camera feeds, watching as armored Marines cut through damaged sections and pushed into the ship. The Krull boarding party inside tried to resist. One Marine took a plasma bolt to the chest. His armor held. He kept moving, grabbing the Krull warrior by the helmet and slamming him into a bulkhead hard enough to crack both. The other Krull surrendered immediately. Smart choice. Marines secured the area in under 2 minutes, then began evacuating survivors. Sarah watched Rita Hayes being carried out on a stretcher, still conscious, still giving orders to her people. The woman had held off 4 military vessels for 3 days with a transport ship. Sarah made a mental note to offer her a commission. The Navy needed officers like that. Admiral, her sensor operator called out. The Velan freighter is hailing us. Captain Faust requests permission to speak with you directly. Sarah accepted the connection. The Velan captain appeared on her screen, his face showing confusion and fear in equal measure. He was staring at her fleet like he'd never seen warships before. Maybe he hadn't. Most species didn't build ships like Earth did, covered in weapons and armor designed for sustained combat. Admiral Kemp, Faust said carefully, I need to understand something. Your colonists said help was 3 days away, yet you arrived in hours. How? We were closer than they knew. We came as soon as we received their distress signal, with an entire battle fleet. For a single transport ship? Sarah met his eyes directly. For 47 humans who were defending civilians. Yes, we came with everything we had. Faust was quiet for a moment. The Krull commander kept asking me why the humans fought. I couldn't answer him. I've been watching your species for 3 days, and I still don't understand. Why did they fight when they could have escaped? Why did you come with such overwhelming force for so few people? Sarah considered the question. She could give him the tactical answer, explain human military doctrine and Earth's policy on protecting citizens. She could talk about deterrence and showing strength, but none of that was really why. Because they asked for help, she said simply. Because Rita Hayes heard your distress call and decided that mattered more than her own safety. Because humans don't leave people behind, even strangers. We protect our own, Captain Faust. And when someone stands beside us in a fight, they become our own. Rita made that choice. We honored it. Faust looked at her for a long moment. Your people are terrifying. Yes, Sarah agreed. We are. But we're also the ones who come when you call. Remember that. She cut the connection and turned back to her tactical display. The Krull vessels were secured, prisoners being transferred to holding cells. Horizon's Edge survivors were being evacuated to the medical bays on her cruisers. The engagement was over. Justice would come later, in courts and tribunals. For now, her people were safe. Communications, Sarah ordered, send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we've secured the sector. Tell them the colonists held for 3 full days against military raiders. Tell them Rita Hayes and her crew are heroes. She paused, then added, and tell them to spread the word. Tell every species in this sector what happened here. Tell them humans protect those who ask for help. Tell them we don't forget and we don't forgive attacks on our own. Let them decide what that means. The message went out across the galaxy. 5 years had passed since the incident at Calm Waters, but Faust still remembered every detail. He supposed that was normal when you watch someone fight impossible odds and somehow survive. The story had spread through galactic civilization like wildfire, changing how people thought about humans and their place among the stars. Now Faust found himself walking through New Portland Colony, the very destination Rita's transport had been heading toward, when they'd answered his distress call. The colony was thriving. Fields of modified earth crops stretched toward the horizon. Greenhouses hummed with activity, and the settlement proper showed all the marks of successful human expansion. Practical buildings, efficient layout, and enough defensive installations to make a military planner nervous. Humans built every colony like they expected attack. After 3 days watching Horizon's Edge fight, Faust understood why. He found Rita working in one of the equipment yards, teaching young colonists how to repair atmospheric processors. She'd refused the Admiral commission Sarah Kemp had offered, choosing instead to continue her original plan of retirement to colony life. But Faust noticed the students watching her with the kind of respect usually reserved for war heroes. Which he supposed she was. Captain Faust, Rita said, looking up from the machine she was demonstrating. Didn't expect to see you out here. I had business on the trade route. Thought I'd stop by. He gestured to the colony around them. You built something impressive here, Rita smiled. We had good motivation. Spent 3 days fighting to reach this place. Wasn't going to let it fail after all that. They walked together through the colony, Rita pointing out various developments while Faust took mental notes. His company had started hiring human security contractors for Velan merchant vessels. It was expensive, but piracy rates on protected ships had dropped to 0. Pirates learned quickly that attacking vessels under human protection meant Earth's warships would hunt you across the galaxy. Some lessons only needed to be taught once. How's David? Faust asked. The young first officer had recovered from his injuries but had stayed with the fleet instead of retiring. Captain of the destroyer Resolute now, 3rd generation of Earth warships, faster and meaner than anything we had 5 years ago. He sends messages sometimes, usually complaining that desk duty is boring. Is there a lot of fighting? Rita shook her head. Not anymore. Word got around. Attack humans or their allies, face the consequences. Most raiders just avoid sectors where we operate. The ones too stupid to learn don't last long. They reached the edge of the colony where a memorial stood, listing the names of those who died aboard Horizon's Edge. 7 names carved in stone, surrounded by native flowers and earth plants growing together. Faust read each name slowly, remembering the people who'd given their lives protecting his crew. We built one too, he said quietly, on our homeworld, a monument to the humans who saved Calm Waters. It's become something of a pilgrimage site. Parents bring their children to teach them about courage. Rita looked uncomfortable with the praise. We just did what anyone should do. But most don't, that's the difference. That's what changed everything. The galactic political landscape had shifted dramatically after the incident. Humans had been offered full membership in the Galactic Council, which they'd accepted with conditions. Earth maintained independent military forces and reserved the right to respond to distress calls, regardless of Council approval. Most species had agreed immediately, wanting access to human protection. A few had objected, calling humans too violent, too aggressive. Those species tended to be the ones who profited from the previous system where the strong preyed on the weak. I testified before the Council, Faust said. They asked me to explain what happened, why we called for help, why you responded. What I witnessed during those 3 days. What did you tell them? The truth. That I watched 47 humans fight 4 military vessels to protect strangers. That you took damage meant for us. That you sent your people to repair our ship while yours was dying. That you never considered surrender even when death was certain. He paused. Some council members said you were crazy. That no logical species would risk so much for others. They wanted to classify humans as dangerously unstable. Rita laughed.
How'd that work out?
The vote failed. Too many species remembered their own distress calls that went unanswered. Too many merchants tired of paying pirates. Too many colonies left undefended because intervention was considered unprofitable. Faust turned to face her directly. You changed the rules, Rita. You showed the galaxy that strength could be used to protect instead of exploit. That changed everything. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that didn't exist on either of their homeworlds. Faust had spent 5 years trying to understand humans, studying their history, their psychology, their seemingly contradictory nature, capable of incredible violence yet choosing compassion, building weapons that could destroy worlds yet using them only in defense. It made no logical sense, which was perhaps the point. The rescue fleet, Faust said, referring to the human military division that now patrolled trade routes. It's the most requested service in the galaxy. Do you know what we pay for human protection? I've heard it's expensive. 20 times the cost of traditional security contractors. And we pay gladly because human protection actually works. Because when we call for help, you come. He smiled. There's a saying that's spread through merchant networks. When you're in trouble, call a human. They're crazy enough to actually show up. Rita laughed again, the sound warm. I'll take that as a compliment. It is. The highest compliment most species can imagine. You built an entire civilization on a principle the rest of us abandoned. Protect your tribe. Expand your tribe to include everyone who needs protection. Fight impossible odds because someone asked for help. Faust shook his head in wonder. We thought you were primitives. Violent children playing with weapons we'd outgrown. We were wrong. You're not behind us in evolution. You're ahead, building something we forgot was possible. Rita looked at the memorial, at the names of those who died. Cost us, though. Costs us every time we fight. Yes, but you do it anyway. That's what makes you human. They walked back toward the colony proper as the stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Faust's ship would leave tomorrow, continuing the trade route that was safer now thanks to human patrols. He'd return to his family, his comfortable life as a merchant captain, knowing that if danger came, humans would respond. Others might mock them for it, call them violent or unstable or too quick to fight. Let them. Faust had seen humans at their worst and their best, had watched them fight and bleed for strangers who'd laughed at them. Thank you, he said as they reached the landing pad where his shuttle waited. For answering that distress call. For protecting us. For showing the galaxy what we'd forgotten. Rita shook his hand, the human gesture of respect he'd learned. Anytime, Faust, that's what we do. We hear someone calling for help and we come. Every time. No matter what. Faust boarded his shuttle and lifted off, watching New Portland colony shrink below him. As he cleared atmosphere and headed toward his ship, he opened the Galactic News Network. The headlines showed the usual mix of trade disputes and political maneuvering, but one story caught his attention. A human rescue fleet had responded to another distress call, this time protecting a research station from raiders. 0 casualties, raiders captured for trial, station crew safe. Same story, different day. Humans being humans, protecting those who asked for help. The rest of the galaxy was still learning what that meant. Faust suspected they'd be learning for generations to come. He'd spent 3 days watching Rita Hayes and her crew refuse to quit, refuse to surrender, refuse to abandon strangers in need. That memory had changed him, changed his people, changed the galaxy. Maybe that was humanity's real weapon, more powerful than their warships or their Deathworld evolution. Not the ability to fight, but the willingness to fight for others. Not the strength to destroy, but the courage to protect. Not the intelligence to build terrible weapons, but the wisdom to use them only in defense of those who couldn't defend themselves. Faust settled into his captain's chair and plotted the jump to FTL. His crew was safe. His cargo was secure. His route was protected by human patrols. 5 years ago, none of that would have been guaranteed. Now it was normal, expected. The galaxy had changed, and humans had changed it by doing the impossible. They'd answered a distress call and refused to quit. Simple as that. Everything else followed from that one decision. Faust wondered what else would follow in the years to come as more species learned what humans had always known. When someone calls for help, you answer. That was humanity's promise. The galaxy was still learning to trust it, but Faust believed. He'd seen it proven in blood and fire. He'd watched it save his life and the lives of his crew. He'd witnessed the impossible become routine because humans simply refused to accept that some things couldn't be done. The stars streaked past as his ship jumped to FTL. Carrying him home through space made safe by humans who'd decided that protecting others mattered more than protecting themselves. Faust smiled and began composing his report. His company would want to know about New Portland Colony, about the memorial, about Rita Hayes still teaching others to fix broken things. Some things stayed broken. Some things couldn't be fixed. But humans kept trying anyway. That was their nature. That was their strength. That was why the galaxy had stopped laughing and started paying attention when humans made promises. Because humans kept their promises, even the impossible ones. Especially the impossible ones.